So, happy Halloween. It's 1:30 p.m., October 31st, 2015. So today is Halloween. It's a Gaelic Samhain New Year. It's a pagan festival. And it's kind of scary, to be honest with you. I mean, Day of the Dead, all the souls of the ancestors and ancient people come back, and we dress up like goblins and ghouls and monsters to scare those ancient spirits, away from us. No, don't get us. We will be scarier than you are. Yeah, that's insane. That's insanity. That's nuts. It does make sense in terms of the lunar or the solar, the New Year, the seasons. It's the midpoint between the fall equinox and the winter solstice. So we have all these midpoints, right? There's a summer, and then fall is like, oh, we're halfway to winter. And then between fall and winter, it's, Halloween. It's like, oh my God, we're almost closer to winter. We're halfway, so we're getting closer to winter. All these festivals are actually winter festivals. Either they're like fall harvest festivals, or let's hunker down. It's going to become winter time. So we've got to pull our resources together, make sure everybody's in a warm spot, and, let's hope that we could survive through the winter. So actually, I hate the idea of being lavish during winter time. That's when you need to pull your resources together and make sure, you can survive, you can hibernate, you can, live through the hibernation. And so we don't need to be having big parties, spending lots of money, throwing, money around for frivolous, silly things, costumes, candy, which, I don't know, candy's pretty cheap, so costumes, Christmas presents, Thanksgiving, the food's actually pretty good. I like Thanksgiving foods. We should focus on the American foods that are native to this continent on Thanksgiving. So that's Halloween to me is just the midpoint between fall and winter. There's a couple other things that happen today. There's Reformation Day. This is when Martin Luther, nails up a piece of paper on the doors to some church. And that starts the Protestant Reformation. He was able to get the Bible translated, I want to say in German, the Gutenberg Printing Press Revolution spread it all over the place. He's the reason why Prussia developed as its own state. So, Reformation Day, some people celebrate that. Other historical events that most of them are good, but there's some bad things that have happened. On October 31st, which is just as scary as Halloween is. So, World War I, the dissolution of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. So you have the Principe, the Gavrilo Principe, who assassinates the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. 1914 starts World War I. And he's a Serb. He's a Yugoslavian nationalist. He doesn't like the Austrian-Hungarian royalty having jurisdiction over his domain. He's a revolutionary. He's an independent. So after he had shot Archduke Franz Ferdinand, Austria issues an ultimatum saying all Serbia must submit to Austria-Hungarian. The Germans were backing them up, in support of the ultimatum. If there was a war, they would, so they essentially kind of pushed Austria into this, but it was successful. What the assassin, Rev Philo Princip, Gavrilo, he's a 19-year-old kid, and it sounds like he's just kind of sitting on a street corner one day, hates, hates the royal class, but when you ever get a chance to see him, and then they drive by, and he happened to have a gun on him. He was standing just loitering, saw the car drive by, shot the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, shot his wife, Sophie, gorgeous woman actually, but they hated the royal classes, didn't like her because she was an aristocrat, but she was poor. She was Czech, but beautiful woman. But shoots Sophie, shoots Franz Ferdinand, and then goes to shoot himself. But the audience and the crowd jumps on him, and eventually he's thrown in a prison, catches tuberculosis, dies a slow death a couple years later. But that's because of what he did. He took out. He was the heir apparent, so he wasn't the king. Franz Joseph was the king of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, but the assassination led to a chain of events that started World War I. So after he was assassinated, there's the ultimatum, and then the Serbs weren't going to agree to it, and so Austria-Hungary's empire tried to enforce its ultimatum, and then you had the allies of Serbia versus the allies of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire started fighting amongst each other. Then hence you got the Great War. The Great War, World War I, all about, this assassination and whether or not Hungary gets to control Yugoslavia and Serbia. It was bad. A lot of people died. There was gas attacks. There was actually a Spanish flu, and also, I want to say not this day, but like 18,000 or 20,000 Americans had died because. So it made me think of biological warfare. Was the Spanish flu, was that, designed to kill Americans? And it wound up killing like 20,000 in a week. In a week, the Spanish flu wound up killing them. So, let's see. It's Halloween, but it's, I guess you can turn anything fun, right? We dress up all stupid and do this and get drunk, and that's the reason is. Get dressed up any day of the week and get drunk. Like, you don't have to have a church-sanctioned holiday, because that's all it was. The Catholic Church co-opted the pagan ritual for themselves. The Day of the Dead in South America. No, it's not Day of the Dead. It's Halloween. So they try to steal the pagans' holidays, incorporate some of their customs and sort of, their Easter bunnies and whatever figures into the narrative. Because, that's actually how we know that which came first, with the chicken or the egg. Because with the egg, it was giant bunny rabbits on Easter lays chicken eggs, and then that's where you get chickens from. So the egg was first. So that debate is settled. And so, okay, now you have the Great World War I, and Austria-Hungary eventually dissolves. They cease to be an empire, no more. It was slow but surely. Eventually, the deciding moment, the reason why it's today, was because one of the guys, the prince or head of Hungary, refused to talk to the guy of Austria, and hence, forevermore, it says here, Charles' last Hungarian Prime Minister, Mihály Károlyi, terminated the personal union with Austria on October 31st, officially dissolving the Austro-Hungarian state. So the state was no more, therefore the empire was no more. If you think about who was the ruling class of Austria-Hungary, it was a bunch of princes and kings and queens, and the whole idea of just hereditary rule. It's like, well, how come you get to be in charge? Well, I said I was in charge. I said it first, so because I said it first, I get to be boss. And it could have actually started out as something so stupid as that. But then once the person was king for 10 years or so, then his son gets to be king, and then his son gets to be king. And most of the wars that happened in Europe was because that simple sort of notion that the oldest male heir becomes king. We'd become complicated. The king wouldn't have any male heirs, just a daughter, and then they would say, well, she couldn't be queen because whatever, they're sexist bastards. And so anytime that, that sort of progression got complicated, then a lot of times, too, they would marry each other, like one royal family of another royal family would marry each other to combine territory, so when their kids would therefore have whatever territory that they have. And Machiavelli, the prince, he says that if you lose your kingdom, nobody remembers you. So where's all this going? That happened on October 31st. October 31st, 1917. So 1918. I want to say 1918. The Austrian-Hungarian Empire was dissolved. So therefore, sometimes to be regicide, to take out, violence is never the answer, but it was the answer for this, for the Serbs. It got Austrian-Hungarian not only off their backs, but they stopped existing after this. So Gavrilo Princip, and he was a martyr to the cause for regicide, and apparently it worked. It was successful. There's a Yugoslavia today. There was the whole mess. Bill Clinton did something. I don't know. They were gassed. I don't know what happened. There was some more Sarajevo or something in the Balkans, and so I'm just going to finish off with the October 31st event. So other things that happened actually on October 31st, the Algerian Revolution against the French begins. So the activities, the Algeria, big-ass country north of Africa, right next to Spain, and they're colonized by the French, and then their independence, the revolutionary movement began today, October 31st. I think it was actually midnight, 1954. President Johnson orders a halt to all bombing of North Vietnam, and they call it the October surprise right before the election. But he orders a complete cessation of all air, naval, and artillery bombardment of North Vietnam effective November 1st. So that was the first indication of a rollback of Vietnam. That was, LBJ quit, and he winds up dying like 5 years later. So he would have completed the first term, but he would have died. So he had health issues. That might have been the reason why. But it seemed like the war was really getting him down right before he stepped out of office. I guess he didn't want to be held responsible for losing the war. He was only in there for 4 years. LBJ was a very transformative president. Unfortunately, just because, he followed JFK, you never know. He was very manipulative, crafty, sketchy, could be scheming, against JFK the whole time. And but the Great Society, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, education, war on poverty, like everything he did is like the civil rights movement. So, and he was only in there for one term, and then he declined to run, so he chose not to go for, and he probably would have got the second term, just because Vietnam wasn't, a success. He was doing okay, but that kind of shows you where we're at right now. In the 60s and 70s, they were able to kick a president out because of a war that they didn't like. Well, we've been in a war, several wars that we don't like, but we're not able to do anything about it. War on Terror for 14 years. It's the longest war in American history. So the War on Terror is the most important, most significant war that we've ever fought, more than the Revolution and the Civil War and World War II. The War on Terror is the bee's knees. It's the absolute shit when it comes to, righteous and good wars, just wars. War seems like it shouldn't be an instrument of foreign policy anymore. If we don't put an end to war, if man doesn't put an end to war, then war will put an end to man. So, that was a good thing that President Johnson did on Halloween of 1968. The election actually of Kentucky is coming up in 3 days from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So, I believe it'll probably be, I'm hoping actually for 40 to 45%, but I'm guessing it's going to be about 30% turnout rate. And the higher the turnout rate, the better it is for the Democrats and Drew Curtis and Kentucky. It's better for Kentucky if more people are engaged in the process, paying attention to their candidates, doing the least of their civic duties. People's Democratic Republic of Yemen adopts the Constitution, but also heard they had a 1991 Constitution. I don't know what's going on with Yemen, but constitutions are revolutionary. They change the rules to the game. Sometimes they could be counter-revolutionary, fascist, totalitarian, but a constitution, that's the start of a revolution is that it changes the whole system, it changes the whole society. Rewriting the rules does that. Now, whether it's going to be for the liberation of the people or for the oppression of the people is usually it's written in the document, but it's for the future to tell us. 1973. 3 provisional Irish Republican Army volunteers escaped from Mountjoy Prison in Dublin using a hijacked helicopter. So the Irish Republican Army, the IRA, the independence movement, they were active, I guess, and they caught 3 people, but the volunteers escaped when they're in a prison using a hijacked helicopter. That's exciting shit. That's a movie, right? Race riot in Jacksonville, Florida. Not a thing to celebrate, but almost sort of like that Spanish flu virus that killed 21,000 Americans in a week in 1918, the same time the Austrian-Hungarian Empire dissolved in World War I. Eugene Debs went to prison for 10 years because he spoke out against World War I. But the race riot, the Spanish flu virus teaches that, an epidemic could just totally start sweeping us. Are we ready for a Spanish flu virus? They're giving us flu shots every year. Do we all get our flu shots? Have we been getting our shots? Before you go to school, you got to have all your shots. And, have we been getting our shots that we need? So it's good, immunization is good. There's a lot of diseases and shit, and especially with bacterial warfare, people could try to find the greatest killing sort of agent out there. So I think being immune to as many, diseases possible is very smart. 1952, the first thermonuclear bomb detonated on Marshall Islands. So the first thermonuclear bomb, the very first one, and nuclear bombs. The Marshall Islands is right between Papua New Guinea, Australia, and Hawaii. So it's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, kind of in the middle of nowhere. But the first one, and the nuclear age, the thermonuclear, so I guess that's different than an atom bomb or a hydrogen bomb. It's thermonuclear. It's on the Marshall Islands, 1952, and it's 7 years after we dropped the bomb on Japan, and now we're detonating nuclear bombs off in the Pacific. Because of nuclear weapons, humanity has been hanging on, by by a thread for quite some time. It has made us sort of peaceful because we don't want to totally destroy us, a mutually assured destruction. But any maniac, any crazy person, there is 8 nuclear countries, 8 countries we all allow to have nuclear weapons, theoretically, because they have good governments and democratically elected, and they'll never have a maniac. But is that true? You can't elect a maniac. Hitler was elected. I want to say Mussolini. Mussolini actually come to power today, so that's a bad thing that happened. But that's not something to celebrate, Also, J. Edgar Hoover, the last meeting with JFK happened on today, and then on the 31st of October, 1963, and then he winds up dying, November 22nd, 23rd or 22nd. But that was only 3 weeks after J. Edgar Hoover talked to him. So what did J. Edgar Hoover know? What was J. Edgar Hoover trying to do? The global population of humans reaches 7 billion in 2011. I think it's 8 billion now. But, so October 31st is 7 billion day. But we've already toppled that. 2011, 4 years, man. we are reproducing at an alarming rate. Now China has ended their two-person policy, so they're going to start producing more people than us. They already got 1 billion people. If they all just had, 2 kids, then we got to, we got to catch up. So I think we need to get the fucking, start repopulating the world with as many good Americans as possible. The best thing you could do for the world is to produce as many of yourself as possible, right? One of the best things. You get to continue, you get to carry on, and you get to spread goodness and hope and cheer. So, happy October 31st, everybody. Yeah, okay.